He was just a black delivery driver, working hard to make ends meet, when a routine delivery turned into a nightmare. A racist cop, looking for a target, unleashed a torrent of brutal violence, leaving the driver beaten and traumatized. The officer thought he was untouchable, another faceless victim silenced. He never imagined the driver worked for a titan of industry, a CEO whose outrage over this injustice would lead them to cancel every single multi-million-dollar contract with the entire city, igniting a firestorm of accountability. Viewers, welcome back. Today, we share a story of shocking brutality and an even more astonishing response. It's about an ordinary man facing extraordinary injustice, and the corporate titan who decided enough was enough, wielding their economic power for profound change. If you believe in stories where the powerful stand for the powerless and systemic change is fiercely pursued, please subscribe and join our community. Your support amplifies these crucial narratives. Thank you for being here for this impactful journey. Rain slicked the pre-dawn streets of Northwood, casting a greasy sheen under the jaundiced glow of streetlights as 30-year-old Mark Washington navigated his delivery van through the sleeping city. Mark was the kind of man who defined reliability. A steady, hard-working father of two, his days and often nights a blur of routes, drop-offs, and the constant pressure of on-time performance for SwiftServe Logistics, one of the nation's largest courier and delivery companies. He wasn't just delivering packages, he was delivering paychecks for his family, hope for a better future for his kids, and a quiet dignity earned through honest labor. His van, emblazoned with the ubiquitous SwiftServe logo, was a familiar sight in almost every neighborhood, a symbol of the city's lifeblood, the constant flow of goods that kept its commerce ticking. Mark took pride in his work, in his clean driving record, in the polite, professional demeanor he maintained, even with the most difficult customers or under the most stressful conditions. He was an ordinary man doing an essential job, largely invisible to the city's powerful yet utterly vital to its daily functioning. SwiftServe Logistics wasn't just any delivery company. It was a corporate behemoth, founded and still helmed by its enigmatic and fiercely principled CEO, Ms. Evelyn Hayes, a different Evelyn Hayes than previously featured, a titan of industry in this narrative. Ms. Hayes was a legend in the business world, a black woman who had shattered glass ceilings and built a global empire from a single van operation through sheer grit, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to ethical practices. She was known for her razor-sharp intellect, her demanding standards, and, less publicly, for her deep-seated intolerance of injustice and her fierce loyalty to her employees, whom she often referred to as the SwiftServe family. While she moved in circles of immense wealth and power, she had never forgotten her own humble beginnings, nor the systemic obstacles she had overcome. SwiftServe held numerous lucrative multi-million-dollar contracts with the city of Northwood, for everything from delivering sensitive documents for City Hall to supplying essential materials for various municipal departments. These contracts were significant, both financially and logistically, for the city's operations. This vast network of civic reliance was Mark Washington's hidden power, though he was entirely unaware of it as he made his early morning rounds. He was just a driver, a number, a cog in a massive machine, or so he and others might have thought. The city of Northwood, beneath its veneer of progress and prosperity, wrestled with a deeply troubled police department. Certain precincts, particularly those in the older, more industrialized sectors where Mark often made his pre-dawn deliveries, were notorious for officers who operated with a sense of impunity. Officer Darren Cole was a product of this toxic culture. Cole was a night shift patrolman with a reputation for a quick temper, a heavy hand, and a particular animosity towards black men he encountered in what he considered his territory. He had a string of citizen complaints in his jacket for harassment, excessive force, racially charged language, but somehow he always managed to evade serious disciplinary action, protected by a supervisor who shared his old-school policing philosophy and a union that aggressively defended even its most problematic members. Cole saw the pre-dawn hours not as a time to protect sleeping citizens, but as an opportunity to exert his authority, to harass and intimidate those he deemed out of place or suspicious, his definition of which was almost always racially coded. Mark Washington was running slightly ahead of schedule, a rare and welcome occurrence. He was making a priority overnight delivery to a pharmaceutical lab located in a sprawling, somewhat desolate industrial park on the city's south side, an area Officer Cole considered his personal hunting ground. Mark had just completed the delivery, obtained the digital signature, and was pulling away from the loading dock, the rain still a steady drizzle, his mind already on his next stop and the prospect of getting home to his family before his kids woke up for school. He was tired, but a familiar sense of quiet satisfaction accompanied the completion of another successful run. He signaled, checked his mirrors, and eased the SwiftServe van back onto the deserted access road. That's when the blinding glare of headlights filled his rearview mirror, followed instantly by the aggressive, unmistakable whoop of a police siren and the strobing assault of red and blue lights. Mark's stomach tightened. He hadn't been speeding. He'd used his signals. His van was in perfect working order. There was no legitimate reason for the stop. Yet here it was. He pulled over immediately, his heart beginning to pound with a familiar, weary apprehension that too many black men experience during encounters with law enforcement, regardless of their innocence. He had no idea that this was not a routine traffic stop. This was an ambush orchestrated by an officer spoiling for a confrontation, an officer whose brutality was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake the city of Northwood to its very foundations and bring the immense, unseen power of SwiftServe Logistics crashing down on the heads of those who had allowed such an officer to wear a badge. The heavy, booted footsteps of Officer Darren Cole crunched on the wet gravel as he approached Mark Washington's SwiftServe van. He didn't bother with the usual professional approach from the passenger side for safety. Instead, he came directly to Mark's window, his large frame and aggressive posture designed to intimidate. He rapped sharply on the glass with his heavy-duty flashlight, even though Mark was already lowering the window. "Well, well, what have we got here?" Cole's voice was a low, gravelly sneer, thick with an assumed authority that brooked no challenge. "Out mighty early, aren't we, pal? Or is it mighty late?" His flashlight beam cut through the dim cab, lingering insolently on Mark's face, then sweeping over the SwiftServe logos on his uniform. Mark, though his heart was hammering, kept his voice even, his hands clearly visible on the steering wheel. "Good morning, officer. I'm Mark Washington with SwiftServe Logistics. Just completed a priority delivery to the lab back there." He gestured vaguely over his shoulder. "Is there a problem?" "Oh, there's always a problem when I'm around, isn't there?" Cole chuckled, a humorless, menacing sound. "License, registration, and your company manifest for this priority delivery. Let's see if your story holds water." His tone was openly contemptuous, already casting Mark as a liar. Mark calmly retrieved his wallet and the van's registration from the overhead compartment, along with the digital manifest on his company-issued tablet. He handed them over. "Everything is in order, officer. You can see the timestamp for the delivery to Medcore Labs." Cole took the documents, making a show of examining them with exaggerated scrutiny under his flashlight beam. He ignored the tablet. "SwiftServe, huh? You guys are like roaches all over the city day and night. What's in these packages you're so prioritizing in the middle of the night? Bet it's not just boxes of donuts." The insinuation was vile, implying illicit activity. "Sir, we deliver essential medical supplies, legal documents, critical business components," Mark explained, his patience wearing thin but his voice still carefully controlled. "My manifest details every item. It's all legitimate and accounted for." "Is it now?" Cole handed back the license and registration, but kept the tablet, turning it over in his hands as if it were alien technology. "Tell you what, Washington, why don't you step out of the van for me? Let's have a little chat. And I think I'm going to need to take a look inside this van of yours. Make sure all these essential supplies are what you say they are." Mark felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. This was escalating just as he'd feared. "Officer, with all due respect," Mark said, his voice firm but polite. "You have my documents. The manifest is clear. On what grounds do you need to search my vehicle? I haven't committed any traffic violation. You haven't stated any probable cause." Cole's eyes, barely visible under the brim of his rain-slicked cap, narrowed into slits. "Probable cause," he sneered. "My probable cause is that you're driving around this deserted industrial park at 3 a.m., looking nervous, and I don't like your attitude. That's all the probable cause I need, pal. Now, are you going to step out, or am I going to have to assist you out?" His hand drifted casually, menacingly, towards his holstered sidearm. Mark knew he was in a dangerous situation. Arguing further with an officer this clearly unhinged and aggressive, alone in a deserted industrial park, was a risk he couldn't afford. He had a family to get home to. "Okay, officer," he said slowly, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'm stepping out. No need for any trouble." He opened his door and carefully, slowly, stepped onto the wet pavement, his hands held slightly away from his body, palms open, to show he was no threat. The moment Mark was out of the van, Cole's demeanor shifted from merely aggressive to overtly hostile. "Turn around, hands on the van, spread 'em," he barked, shoving Mark roughly against the cold, wet metal side of the SwiftServe vehicle. The force of the shove sent a jolt of pain through Mark's shoulder. "Officer, I'm not resistant," Mark began, his voice tight with pain and disbelief. "Shut your mouth," Cole roared, kicking Mark's legs further apart. He began a rough, humiliating pat-down, his hands unnecessarily forceful, his breath reeking of stale coffee and something vaguely sour close to Mark's ear. He found nothing, of course. Mark was a working man, not a criminal. Cole's frustration seemed to mount with every empty pocket. "Where are the drugs, Washington?" Cole growled, yanking Mark's arms higher up his back. "Or the stolen goods? What are you really hauling in this truck?" "I told you, officer, it's all legitimate deliveries," Mark gasped, the pressure on his arms becoming unbearable. "There's nothing illegal in my van or on my person. You're making a mistake." "The only mistake here, pal," Cole hissed, his voice dripping with venom, "was you thinking you could get smart with me." And then, without any further warning, without any provocation whatsoever, Officer Darren Cole began to brutalize Mark Washington. He slammed Mark's face against the side of the van, causing a sharp crack as Mark's forehead connected with a metal rivet. Stars exploded behind Mark's eyes. Before he could cry out, Cole kneed him viciously in the back of his thigh, sending him sprawling to the wet, gritty asphalt. Pain, sharp and searing, shot through his leg. Mark lay there, dazed, gasping for breath, the taste of blood and wet pavement in his mouth. He tried to push himself up, but Cole was on him in an instant, one heavy boot pinning his shoulder to the ground, the other grinding into his lower back. "Thought you were tough, huh?" Cole sneered, yanking Mark's head back by his hair, exposing his throat. "Resisting arrest, are we? Assaulting an officer?" "No, please, I'm not doing anything," Mark cried out, terror now mixing with the agony. He could feel the cold rain on his face, could hear Cole's ragged, angry breathing above him. This wasn't an arrest. This was a beating. This was a cop losing control, fueled by hate and a desire to inflict pain. Cole ignored his pleas. He delivered a series of sickening thuds, punches to Mark's ribs, his side, his back. Mark curled into a fetal position, trying to protect himself, his mind reeling, a silent scream trapped in his throat. Each blow stole his breath, each impact a fresh wave of agony. He thought of his wife, his children. Would he ever see them again? Then, as suddenly as it began, the physical assault seemed to pause. Cole, panting heavily, stepped back. Mark, bruised, bleeding, and trembling uncontrollably, dared to crack open an eye. He saw Cole fumbling with something on his duty belt. Handcuffs? No, it was worse. Cole pulled out a small, dark object. His personal, department unauthorized brass knuckles. The glint of metal in the dim, rainy light was terrifying. "You know Washington," Cole said, his voice now eerily calm, a chilling counterpoint to his previous rage. "I really don't like smart-mouthed delivery boys who think they're above the law, especially your kind." He slipped the brass knuckles onto his right hand. "I think you need a more permanent lesson in respecting authority." Mark's blood ran cold. This was no longer just a beating. This was an officer intending to inflict grievous, perhaps even life-threatening, injury. The hidden power of his CEO, of his company, was a million miles away. In this dark, deserted corner of the city, under the cold, indifferent rain, Mark Washington was utterly alone, at the mercy of a brutal racist cop who was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. The consequences of this night, however, were far beyond anything Officer Cole, in his hate-filled delirium, could possibly comprehend. The glint of brass knuckles in Officer Cole's hand under the desolate streetlight was a terrifying punctuation mark to an already brutal assault. Mark Washington, lying battered and bruised on the wet asphalt, knew this was a critical escalation, a deliberate intent to maim. Pure primal fear, colder and sharper than the February rain, pierced through the pain. He had to do something, anything, to prevent Cole from using that weapon. "Officer Cole, please," Mark gasped, his voice hoarse, tasting blood. "Don't do this. Think about what you're doing. This is wrong. There are cameras on this van. SwiftServe. They track everything." It was a desperate bluff about internal van cameras, a last-ditch attempt to inject a sliver of doubt, of consequence, into Cole's hate-filled mind. Cole merely laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. "Cameras? You think I care about your little corporate spy cams, delivery boy? They ain't gonna see nothing but you resisting a lawful arrest. And by the time anyone looks at any footage, if they even bother, you'll just be another statistic." He took a menacing step closer, flexing his knuckled hand. But Mark's desperate mention of SwiftServe and tracking, though dismissed by Cole, had inadvertently planted a seed that would later bloom into a forest of consequence. He didn't know it, but his SwiftServe van was indeed equipped with GPS tracking and a silent duress alarm system, a feature Ms. Evelyn Hayes had insisted upon for all her vehicles after a hijacking incident years prior. In his pain and terror, Mark hadn't consciously activated it, but the onboard system also had an impact sensor, designed to trigger an alert in cases of severe collisions or, as it turned out, sustained, violent jarring. The repeated slamming against the van during Cole's initial assault, followed by Mark being thrown to the ground, had silently tripped that sensor a few minutes earlier. An alert flagged as high-impact anomaly, vehicle stationary, was already quietly pinging at SwiftServe's 24/7 Global Security Operations Center hundreds of miles away. Unaware of this silent electronic witness, Cole raised his fist. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable, a prayer forming on his lips for his wife and children. But before the blow could land, a different sound pierced the rainy night, the distant but rapidly approaching wail of multiple sirens, not just one but several, converging from different directions. Cole froze, his knuckled fist hovering midair, his head snapped up, his eyes darting around wildly. "What the hell?" he muttered, clearly not expecting other units. He hadn't called for backup. This wasn't supposed to happen. His little power trip was supposed to be private, unobserved. The sirens grew louder, closer. Headlights cut through the rain, resolving into 2, then 3 OPD patrol cars, and, significantly, a supervisor's vehicle, lights blazing. They screeched to a halt, boxing in Cole's cruiser and Mark's SwiftServe van, their beams illuminating the horrifying scene. A uniformed officer standing over a prone, clearly injured civilian, a glint of metal on the officer's hand. "Officer Cole, stand down. What is going on here?" A voice boomed from the lead supervisor's car. It was Sergeant Miller, a different, more senior and respected Miller than in previous stories, a veteran officer known for his by-the-book approach and his intolerance for cowboy cops. Cole, caught red-handed, or rather brass-knuckled, looked like a deer in headlights. He quickly, furtively, tried to slip the brass knuckles off and pocket them, but it was too late. Sergeant Miller and 2 other officers were already out of their cars, weapons drawn but pointed low, their faces grim. "He was resisting arrest, Sarge," Cole blurted out, his voice suddenly high-pitched, panicked. "He assaulted me. I had to defend myself." Mark, seeing his chance, pushed himself up on one elbow, pain shooting through his body. "That's a lie," he choked out. "He attacked me for no reason. He was about to hit me with those." He pointed a trembling finger towards Cole's hand, which was still awkwardly trying to conceal the brass knuckles. Sergeant Miller's eyes narrowed, fixing on Cole's hand, then on Mark's battered face and torn uniform. The scene told a very different story than Cole's frantic claims. "Cole, show me your hands." "Slowly," Miller commanded, his voice like ice. Reluctantly, shamefacedly, Cole raised his hands, the brass knuckles still partially visible. One of the other officers swiftly moved in, disarmed Cole of his service weapon, and then, with a look of utter disgust, removed the brass knuckles, holding them up for Sergeant Miller to see. "Brass knuckles, Cole." Sergeant Miller's voice was dangerously quiet. "Department issue, are they? Or your personal de-escalation tool?" The sarcasm was biting. The arrival of the other officers, triggered not by a call from Cole, but likely by the SwiftServe security alert being relayed through official channels, or by a nearby patrol noticing Cole's unsanctioned stop in a deserted area for an unusually long time, had completely upended Cole's brutal script. The hidden power of corporate oversight and interdepartmental communication, however indirect, had intervened. Mark, now being attended to by 2 of the newly arrived officers, who were calling for paramedics, felt a wave of dizzying relief wash over him, so potent it almost made him pass out. He was still in agony, still terrified, but he wasn't alone anymore. The monster had been interrupted. Sergeant Miller ordered Cole to be placed in the back of a cruiser. "For his own safety and ours," he added grimly. The investigation into this was going to be immediate, and Miller knew, looking at Mark's injuries and Cole's now exposed weapon, that it was going to be ugly. As paramedics arrived and began to assess Mark's injuries, a broken rib, a possible concussion, severe contusions, and a deep laceration above his eye, the full scope of Cole's brutality began to come into focus. Mark, even through the haze of pain, made sure to tell Sergeant Miller and the paramedics about the SwiftServe van's tracking and potential recording capabilities. Meanwhile, at SwiftServe's global security hub, The high-impact anomaly alert for Mark's van had escalated. Standard procedure was to attempt to contact the driver. When Mark didn't respond to multiple calls, and the GPS showed his van stationary in an unusual location for an extended period, the security team leader, a retired police detective named Frank Rourke, coincidentally the same name as the disgraced sergeant from a previous story, but a man of integrity here, initiated their Code Red protocol. This involved immediately contacting the local police department with a welfare check request for their driver and vehicle, providing the exact GPS coordinates and simultaneously alerting SwiftServe's executive chain of command. Within 30 minutes of the initial alert, an email flagged urgent driver assault incident Northwood landed in the inbox of Ms. Evelyn Hayes, the CEO of SwiftServe Logistics. She was in her penthouse apartment preparing for an early flight to a global trade summit in Singapore. She opened the email, her brow furrowing as she read the preliminary report from her security chief. SwiftServe driver Mark Washington attacked during a delivery stop. OPD officer involved. Extent of injuries unknown. Driver en route to Northwood General Hospital. Evelyn Hayes was a woman who did not suffer fools, incompetence, or injustice gladly. Her rise to the top of the corporate world had been meteoric, but it had also been paved with battles against bias and systemic inequities. She had a deep, almost maternal sense of responsibility for her tens of thousands of employees worldwide. An assault on one of her drivers, especially one allegedly involving a police officer, was not something she would delegate or dismiss. She picked up her secure phone and dialed her chief operating officer and her general counsel. "Clear my schedule for the next 48 hours, she said, her voice calm but with an underlying edge of cold fury. "Divert the jet to Northwood. I'm handling this personally. Get me every piece of information we have on this incident and find out who the hell Officer Darren Cole is. And then get me the mayor of Northwood on the line. He's about to have a very bad day." The hidden power was no longer hidden. It was fully engaged, and it was heading for Northwood like a Category 5 hurricane. The arrival of Ms. Evelyn Hayes in Northwood was less like a corporate visit and more like the descent of an avenging angel. Her private jet touched down less than 6 hours after she received the initial alert, a testament to her decisive nature and the formidable resources at her command. She was met not by a welcoming committee from City Hall. They were still scrambling to understand the magnitude of the storm about to break, but by her pre-positioned regional security team and a phalanx of high-powered attorneys from SwiftServe's legal department who had flown in from 3 different states. Her first stop was Northwood General Hospital. Mark Washington was in a private room, heavily sedated for the pain, his wife, Sarah, sitting vigil by his bedside, her face a mask of anguish and fury. Ms. Hayes entered quietly, her presence commanding yet compassionate. She introduced herself to Sarah, expressed her profound regret and outrage over what had happened to Mark, and then, with a quiet intensity, she listened. She listened to Sarah's tearful account of Mark's dedication, his fear of such encounters despite his impeccable record. She listened to the preliminary report from the attending physician detailing Mark's injuries, the fractured rib, the concussion, the extensive bruising that spoke of a savage beating, the stitches above his eye. She saw the fear in Sarah's eyes for her husband's future, for their family's safety. With each word, each observed detail, Evelyn Hayes's resolve hardened. This was not just an isolated incident of a rogue cop. This was a symptom of a deeper malaise, a systemic failure that allowed such brutality to occur and go unpunished. She assured Sarah that SwiftServe would cover all of Mark's medical expenses, provide for his family during his recovery, and deploy the full force of their legal team to ensure justice was served. "Mark is part of the SwiftServe family, Sarah," Ms. Hayes said, her voice firm but gentle, "and we protect our family." Her next stop was the office of Northwood's mayor, Thomas P. Riley, a man whose political career had been largely unremarkable until this moment. The meeting was not a negotiation, it was a declaration. Ms. Hayes, flanked by her legal counsel, laid out the facts as she knew them. The unprovoked assault on her employee by an OPD officer, the officer's history of complaints. Her team had already pulled an astonishing amount of data. The city's failure to adequately discipline or remove such a problematic officer. "Mr. Mayor," Evelyn Hayes began, her voice deceptively calm, "SwiftServe Logistics has enjoyed a long and, until now, mutually beneficial relationship with the city of Northwood. We provide essential services. We employ hundreds of your citizens. We pay substantial taxes. We expect in return a safe and lawful environment for our employees to conduct their duties. What happened to Mr. Mark Washington last night was not just an assault. It was a profound betrayal of that expectation. It was an act of barbarity committed by an agent of your city." Mayor Riley, flustered and clearly out of his depth, began to offer apologies, to speak of ongoing investigations, of Officer Cole's suspension. Ms. Hayes cut him off. "Apologies are insufficient, Mr. Mayor. Investigations are standard procedure. Suspension is a temporary measure. What I am here to discuss are consequences, real, tangible, city-altering consequences." She paused, letting her words sink in. "As of this moment, SwiftServe Logistics is initiating a review of all its existing contracts with the city of Northwood and its various departments. That includes, but is not limited to, our exclusive courier services for City Hall, our supply chain management for the Department of Public Works, our just-in-time delivery contract for Northwood General Hospital's non-pharmaceutical supplies, and our fleet maintenance agreement for a portion of the city's non-emergency vehicles. These contracts, as you know, are worth tens of millions of dollars annually to this city." Mayor Riley's jaw literally dropped. The color drained from his face. "Ms. Hayes, you can't be serious. To review, to potentially cancel those contracts, it would cripple essential city services, the economic impact, the disruption." "The disruption, Mr. Mayor," Ms. Hayes interjected, her voice like ice, "has already occurred. It occurred when my employee, an innocent man doing his job, was brutally beaten by one of your police officers. The economic impact on Mr. Washington, on his family, on my company's reputation and operational security is already significant. What I am proposing is that the city of Northwood now share in that impact, so that perhaps in the future it will take its responsibilities regarding the conduct of its police force with the seriousness it deserves." She then laid out her demands, non-negotiable: the immediate, public, and unequivocal termination of Officer Darren Cole, the immediate opening of a criminal investigation into Officer Cole by an independent outside agency, such as the State Attorney General's office, with full cooperation from the city of Northwood, a comprehensive independent audit of the Northwood Police Department's hiring, training, disciplinary, and community interaction protocols, with a particular focus on racial bias and use of force, the establishment of a fully empowered independent civilian complaint review board with subpoena power and the authority to recommend binding disciplinary actions, a formal public apology from the mayor and the chief of police to Mr. Mark Washington and his family, acknowledging the city's culpability, and most critically, tangible, verifiable progress on all these fronts within 30 days. If and only if, Ms. Hayes concluded, we see immediate, substantive, and irreversible action on these points, will SwiftServe Logistics reconsider its position regarding its contracts with the city of Northwood. If not, consider those contracts terminated, effective 30 days from today. We will, of course, fulfill our legal obligations regarding wind-down periods, but our long-term partnership will be over. The choice, Mr. Mayor, is yours, but I suggest you choose wisely and quickly, because my patience, unlike my company's delivery network, is not inexhaustible. The ultimatum was delivered. The CEO of one of the nation's largest corporations had just drawn a line in the sand, using the full weight of her economic power to demand justice for one of her drivers. The city of Northwood was officially on the clock. The public condemnation of Officer Cole was about to be amplified by a corporate backlash that threatened to bring the city's operations to a grinding halt. The 30-day deadline set by SwiftServe CEO Evelyn Hayes hung over Northwood City Hall like a sword of Damocles. Mayor Riley and the city council, initially stunned into a state of panicked disbelief, quickly realized the catastrophic implications of losing the SwiftServe contracts. It wasn't just the tens of millions in direct revenue and services. It was the cascading effect on the city's economy, its reputation, its bond rating, and its ability to attract future investment. SwiftServe was too big, too integral to the city's functioning, to lose. The public outcry over Officer Cole's brutality, already intense, would become a political inferno if essential city services began to falter due to canceled contracts. The pressure was immense, and it came from all sides. Local businesses, reliant on SwiftServe for their own operations, lobbied City Hall furiously. Northwood General Hospital administrators warned of dire consequences if their supply chains were disrupted. City department heads painted grim pictures of operational paralysis, and the citizens of Northwood, already outraged by the assault on Mark Washington, saw Ms. Hayes's ultimatum as a powerful lever for forcing long-overdue reforms on a recalcitrant police department. Officer Darren Cole, already suspended, became the immediate sacrificial lamb. The internal affairs investigation, which might have once dragged on for months, was concluded with record speed. The evidence, Mark Washington's testimony, the medical reports, the GPS data from the SwiftServe van, which corroborated Mark's location and the duration of the stop, the testimonies of the responding supervisor, Sergeant Miller, and the paramedics, and Cole's own flimsy, contradictory statements, was overwhelming. Cole was summarily fired from the Northwood Police Department, his termination effective immediately.